I encourage parents to cope out loud, as I call it. So if a parent finds themselves in a challenging situation, and that could be anxiety, it could be frustration, it could be anything, to talk through it out loud and model recognizing, naming their emotion. The parent could be sitting there, they could be in the minivan on the way home from school, and the parent says, wow, this traffic is really awful. I'm starting to feel really impatient, really frustrated. I really want to start honking the horn, but I know that's not going to be very helpful. So I'm just going to take a couple of deep breaths, maybe turn on the radio. And the children may be looking at the parent like, what's going on with mom? But I think it shows children that adults too, are susceptible to difficult emotions, and we can work through it in a healthy, pro-social way.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and this is Well, Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and well-being, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. I am joined by two guests today. This is a first for the podcast. I've not had two guests joining me at the same time, so I'm really, really excited for what we're going to be talking about today. Particularly, this is an issue close to my heart and close to many of your hearts as well. One of the things that we know is that rising levels of anxiety, it's taking its toll on young people, but also on families. And this crisis that we're facing, and it really is a crisis when we look at the statistics around child and adolescent mental health challenges, it's not just about what the children are experiencing. We as parents, families, brothers, sisters, all are affected by it very much as well. And we care very much about trying to support them, trying to guide them, trying to help them get the extra support they need when it's warranted. We're not just part of the picture as parents, we are actually a vital part of the solution. We play a really important role. That's why today's episode is a very special one. I am joined by two brilliant minds in the field of psychology, both deeply committed to helping anxious children and their parents not just survive and keep your head above water, but actually thrive and feel more empowered, more confident and more hopeful. Chris McCurry, Dr. Chris McCurry, is a returning guest, and he is just one of my all-time favourite guests. We spoke when I had just started the podcast, and it was such a delight to bring Chris's wisdom to you. And please, we'll link back to that episode in the show notes if you'd like to go back and hear our first conversation. He is a clinical child psychologist based in Seattle. He's a long-time ACT practitioner who studied ACT with co-founder Steve Hayes and has written multiple books for both parents and professionals, including one of my favourites, Parenting Your Anxious Child with Mindfulness and Acceptance, and newly released book Just in Case sits with anxiety, and other books that we're going to talk about at the end of the episode as well. Also joining us today is the wonderful Emma Waddington, a clinician, author, podcaster, a mum and founder of Us Therapy in Singapore, with over 25 years of experience and a passion for reducing stigma. Emma brings a rich insight into mental health relationships and the role of culture and connection in healing. And together, Chris and Emma have their own podcast, which is called Life's Dirty Little Secrets, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. We're going to talk about anxiety and temperament, helping anxious children to thrive, and the role of parents and the very important role of parents when it comes to supporting young people with their anxiety and mental health. So that was big intro. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Yes, that was a lovely intro. Really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you both. You just your contributions to this field of work are so important, and to have you both here today is really special. So I wanted to start by asking about temperament, because I know that this is something that plays a really important role when it comes to anxiety, and I'd love for parents who are listening to and teachers as well to get a better understanding about the way that a child's temperament plays a role in their anxiety and in their mental health, and what to look out for.
Temperament is essentially the biological basis of personality. So we're born with a certain neurological wiring, which sets us up for reacting to, interacting with the environment in certain ways. And so temperament has been talked about, studied for a long time, and people may be familiar with type A personalities or introverts or extroverts, and this all speaks to temperament. Even though only about 15% of people are pure extroverts and 15% are pure introverts, most people are a mix, and it's all context dependent. I can be very extroverted in one situation and quite introverted in another, but it's biologically based, it's real, it's durable. And so you have kids who are very exuberant, very outgoing, and you have kids that tend to be more on the shy side. This is particularly true in new situations. So they're more reticent. They don't engage quite so quickly. They're slow to warm up, all these descriptions.
Mm.
So kids hit the world, particularly school, and they start getting mushed toward the middle. So the exuberant kids are told to like sit down and be quiet, and the shy kids are encouraged to speak up and be more engaged. And so they start getting shaped by society and families and such. But those tendencies are still there. And we like to say that temperament is tendency, not destiny,
Mm.
because we can learn to override our tendencies. That exuberant kid can override the urge to, jump up and announce to the whole class what they did over the weekend. The shy child can override the tendency to hang back when when it serves them to lean in and engage. And so that's what a lot of parents do is they try to get kids to override their tendencies when the situation calls for it. And that's what we do when we work with kids to recognize their tendencies, to respect them and not beat themselves up about it.
Yeah.
And at the same time to say, in this situation, maybe you want to kind of override that or do something that's a little uncomfortable in the service of some important goal.
You make me think about something my husband Peter said to me once, because we have two children, a son and a daughter, son older, who is just like a carbon copy of me in terms of temperament and personality. And our daughter is the carbon copy of Peter. And sometimes you're in the weeds, aren't you? And you can't sort of see what's happening. And sometimes it helps to have someone give you a bit more of a bigger picture look at what's happening. And I was parenting her in the same way I'd parent child number one, which had been relatively successful, and it wasn't working. Things just weren't working the same. And he said to me, it's probably worth just remembering, he is you, she is me. And the minute he said that, I'm like, because he and I are just polar opposites, I'm like, like the penny dropped. And it's just that recognition and that reflection, isn't it? Because it's so powerful when we have a good understanding of them and we can steer them and guide them, like you say, Chris, without overriding, without trying to sort of make them something that they're not. But with temperament and anxiety, what's that connection? What should parents be sort of looking for?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the idea that this is biology. And so some people are just wired up to be more sensitive. And, if we're talking about the fight or flight response, getting that activated, some kids are just triggered more easily. And novel situations, challenges will set off a fight or flight response more readily than another child. And so if parents can recognize that, my child has these tendencies toward getting activated, getting triggered in these situations, I can, on the one hand, prepare for it, help the child with some warnings about what's coming up, what I call inoculating, saying, this is this situation that's coming up, how you might feel, maybe do a little role playing ahead of time, like, we're going to go to the party and you're going to walk in and, you're going to be really nervous, but here's some things that you can do to kind of ease them into the situation, give them some strategies. and have the parent recognize that this is not something that the child has a lot of control over
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of, their initial reactions to situations. But again, once they can recognize, oh yeah, I'm having that feeling again, I'm having that idea again,
Mm.
and they can then, maneuver through the situation with some help, with some coaching.
I really love the way that you reference this idea of inoculation, and that is it social storytelling, this idea that sort of leading into an event or a party that you kind of plant those seeds about what to expect. Is that in line with social storytelling? Is that the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're letting children know that these are expectable, normal reactions to situations, and we can deal with them in an effective way, not
Yeah.
just either retreat or try to control the situation in a way that's not going to be helpful.
Yes. On that notion of retreat and avoidance when it comes to doing things that are challenging, kids will naturally, if they're finding something that feels uncomfortable or their fight or flight reaction has been activated and they don't want to do something that is important and that they might very much enjoy if they can dip their toe in the water and move forward despite how they're feeling. Can you speak to the really important role of parents and the sort of the tug of war that parents often have between, I know that this is important, I know that taking my child to this birthday party and my child coming and, spending some time with their friends is a really special and important thing to do. But also the parent going, well, it can be really hard work because my child gets very distressed. And also I feel upset when they feel upset, and that sort of tug of war between, yes, we need to do it, but they don't want to, and I'm finding it hard. And where do we find that balance?
Yes, I was just, as you were both talking about temperament, I was thinking how our own temperaments play a part as a parent. Like, we also have our own wiring and history. And when we get triggered, so some parents are anxious in and of themselves and they have anxious children. And sometimes that can work really well because they really understand their kids. And if they've done their own work and they have their own strategies, they can support their kid. But sometimes it can be incredibly hard, like you're saying, Jodi, where we get quite triggered because perhaps we've had a really difficult history with anxiety. Maybe we were the anxious kid that couldn't get to the birthday party and didn't have friends and felt like they didn't belong. And that'll show up when our kid won't go to the birthday party. And I think as parents, it can be really tricky because we have to navigate our own emotions, our own narrative, our own stories about what's happening while supporting them too. So sometimes I think we've just got to be mindful as to what we can handle in the moment. If we're really flooded with emotion, if for some reason we're just feeling very upset about a situation, this is where it's helpful to have two parents, like you're saying, Jodi, right? There's your co-parent that can perhaps take over the situation if you're just getting really triggered and perhaps going to be unhelpful. Chris, you talk about this wonderful dance with our children, and I love that metaphor because we can get stuck in an unhelpful dance. So there is quite a bit of work involved in being very mindful in a way of what's happening for us as parents as we navigate some of these challenges that our children may have. We might be able to notice that we're not handling it the best we can, that we can sort of play tag team. And sometimes it might be okay just to say, let's just not go to the party today. I think it's important to be very compassionate. I believe, I'm a parent of 3. I'm a strong advocate of being kind to ourselves as parents. I think the demands on parents today are far greater than they were for my parents, and the expectations on our children are also really high. So being kind and compassionate to ourselves and our kids is important, whilst not losing sight of where we think, our values as parents, what really matters. And if, having an independent child, a child that can do certain things for themselves is really important, then zooming out and looking at the bigger picture as opposed to that one moment. But over the course of time, is my kid able to socialize? Do they have a group? Perhaps not the size that we think they should, but do they have a community? And therefore, is it important for us to push at this point,
Yeah.
in the context of everything else? I think it's just, yeah, sometimes it's taking a zoom out and being able to look at the bigger picture instead of just that one moment. We can get quite tripped up and tight in that one instant.
I think that idea of zooming out and getting that perspective is so powerful, and that self-compassion as well, that you won't undo all the good work by having a day where you're not quite up to it, and saying, hey, you know what, let's just start all over tomorrow. And like you say, you might not succeed every time. It's small steps, and sometimes there are pauses on that ladder, and sometimes there might feel like there's a little bit of a backward step, but that bigger picture is really important. And we've got time. We've got time as parents. I think sometimes we feel like, oh, if I don't get this sorted today or tomorrow, then, oh goodness, then time's up. But we've got years to shape our children, and support them if they find certain things difficult and challenging. Some things will take weeks, some things will take months, and other things you'll build further towards depending on what it is. So that zooming out, that idea of that bird's eye view, I think can take a lot of the stress off, can't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's just the narrative that we live in, this kind of, we talked about it just recently on our podcast, this toxic striving, this idea that, we're constantly up against goals and outcomes, and actually, I think taking a much gentler approach. I like this idea of parenting being more like a gardener versus that carpenter. There was a book years ago about this idea, this concept that we're there to support our children, to help them unfold in whatever way their tendencies or, if we're thinking for temperament, will help them blossom.
Yes.
And sometimes we get pulled into trying to make them something that they're just simply not. And we just have to be careful.
I really love that metaphor.
And it's also the case that, parents aren't the only ones socializing children. And there are teachers and uncles and aunts and other parents and coaches. My son, went into the Boy Scouts, and he learned to do stuff for his scoutmaster and his fellow scouts that he never would have done for me. Because kids are a little more regressed around their parents, and parents get their buttons pushed, and as Emma said, sometimes you just don't want to push it that day, but a coach can say, come on, let's go, and the child will go. And that's how they learn that they can be resilient and tougher than they think they are, and can be successful. And so it's not just, all on the parents to turn this child into, successful adult. That we can get help.
You're right. And you bring to mind, when I think about all of the different experiences that my own children have had and my friends' children have had through all of their sports and extracurricular activities, and with each other and with other friends' parents, it really is. And that takes the pressure off us again, doesn't it? I think we hold so much weight on our shoulders, and the beautiful metaphor about just letting things unfold, helping them to grow into who they are going to be, and supporting them and providing all of the things that they need, but also knowing that other people are tending to that garden. Emma, you referenced the anxiety dance, which Chris and I did speak about last time. And I think it's probably really timely for us to revisit that, Chris, if you can talk a little bit about this, the ABC dance, and share with listeners, just to give them this view of parenting anxious kids that you wrote so beautifully about in your book, Parenting Anxious Kids with Mindfulness and Acceptance.
That's very kind of you to say so. It's basically the idea that we get into patterns of behavior, not just with our kids, but with our spouses and people at work and whomever. And you get into these routines, and they can become very effective when they're efficient and get us to our goals, particularly when they're well rehearsed. But they can become quite automatic and even unconscious, which allows them to be more efficient. But things that are barely conscious are hard to change. And so when the pattern or the dance, as I like to call it, between parent and child isn't going well, it's hard to re-choreograph that because
Mm.
sometimes, parents find themselves doing things, here I am saying that thing again that I swore I wouldn't say again. And it's highly predictable. Monday morning trying to get ready for school or bedtime or whatever, we have these routines. And so by talking about the dance and stepping back a little bit and saying, let's look at this.
Mm.
And, most psychologists do something called a functional analysis, which is looking at, the series of events and trying to unpack that a little bit. And we talk about antecedent conditions or triggers or activators. And we talk about the behavior itself, the tantrum or the refusing to go to school or whatever it may be. And then the consequence, A, B, and C. And the consequence may be, I'll give you $1 if you go to school. Or the consequence may be, okay, fine, you don't have to go to school, which may reinforce the child's, reticence and acting out at that moment. So and I do this on the whiteboard in my office because I think it's helpful for people to actually see, okay, this happens, then this happens, then happens, and is this what we want? And where can we at some point redirect things? Sometimes we talk about the choice point or pivoting in a different direction for possibly a better outcome.
Mm.
So that's typically how I talk about this with parents, and they say, how can we re-choreograph the dance? How can we do things differently? But it really starts with awareness that you're even doing a dance and recognizing that this is not getting us where we want to go.
Thank you. And as I said, I'll link to the first time that we discussed that at more length, so that listeners can get more detailed information. Of course, Chris's book is available, and between you, I love that you've co-authored, and excited to talk about those books as well. One of the things about parenting anxious kids is that it can feel really overwhelming, and it can feel quite exhausting. And a lot of families, there is only one parent, and there might not be much of a village around. In other families, parents might not be on the same page and might have different approaches. I wonder, Emma, if you can speak to this idea that it is hard, but there are really powerful things parents can do to make a difference, whether they are parenting on their own or with someone else, to really help their anxious young person to not only survive anxiety, but thrive with it, because we know we never get rid of it.
When I think about parenting in general, I often think about the emotional regulation piece.
Yeah.
Because in a way, like what Chris was talking about with his fabulous metaphor of the dance, we're often an autopilot because there's so much happening that we're sort of thrust into situations without really being aware of what's happening. And I think parenting, there's a lot of being thrust into situations, and even more so when you've got an anxious child. So that self-regulation piece is very important. As parents, we can model self-regulation and sort of understanding the chain of events. So Chris talked about a functional analysis. I often think about, as parents, these are skills that are really helpful. And what we think about when we think about a functional analysis, you're thinking about the chain of events that get you to the problematic situation, and making sure our children have enough sleep and enough food sounds super basic, but it's so important. When we look at contexts in which children get anxious, it's often at some of these junctions where perhaps it's going to school, or perhaps it's going to their after school activities, or going to a friend's house. And sort of thinking of, how well did they sleep? Are they fully fed?
Yeah.
Sometimes some of our children need to have quite a bit of downtime to down-regulate, just on a nervous system level, thinking about what helps us to feel more regulated, just emotionally in a better spot. And anxiety is an emotion. And so if we can help our kids to have enough downtime, some of us need a lot of downtime, a lot of time, just quiet time, alone, reading a book, anything that sort of helps to down-regulate the activities of the day. So being really mindful of how do I help to keep turning down the volume on my child's anxiety is really important. And that happens throughout the day. And I think sometimes when there's a temperament mismatch between a parent and a child, that can be a problem, because what helps us downregulate might be busyness. I know lots of people that find being busy and productive, and I'm doing air quotes there, can help us feel calmer.
Yeah.
And yet maybe that's not our kid. Our kid needs quiet time, and we just need to be more mindful of that chain of events. And when we do have an outburst of anxiety, really rewinding and thinking, what could have helped to make that better? What could have made it easier and perhaps more successful?
What would you say to the idea that if parents were to just take the foot off the pedal a little bit and step back with a notepad and a pencil and maybe just spend a week or so with a bird's eye view of kind of what's happening and a bit of reflection? What do you think that would be a helpful thing for a parent of an anxious child to kind of take some time to reflect on the circumstances, like you were saying just a moment ago, when there's an anxious moment or a very anxiously distressed, highly distressed, anxious child, and rewinding? Do you think there would be merit in kind of going, well, let's look at the week and let's look at kind of some patterns, like you were saying, Chris, about the dance, that we can see in the moment what the patterns are, but also stepping back and going, what are the times of the day, and just stepping back from the action towards supporting the anxious child and just observing and getting a little bit more information so that you're better equipped moving forward?
I'm not sure I'd advocate a parent following their child around with a notepad taking notes, because that might make an anxious child even more anxious. But no, I'm big on data. Whenever I do like a point program or token economy or something, I always have people track it, because I want to know, okay, Tuesdays, what's up with Tuesdays? Something's going on there. And we can investigate that and figure out what are the contextual factors, the triggers, as Emma was saying, a friend of mine calls hypoglycemia. But this gets us into mindfulness, the ability to kind of just step back a little bit and observe. And, a parent may feel like that's not doing anything, but it is doing a lot in terms of getting a better understanding of the dance. I do this, my child does that, then I do this and I do that. And, where can I like pivot to a different pattern? So, whether it's, tracking compliance, or tracking, what days of the week tend to be better for getting out of the house in the morning. I think it's really important to get parents to be more curious about these things, because, curiosity is a great antidote to, panic.
Well said, well said. And Emma, you were talking about down-regulating for parents and turning down the volume. Have you got some suggestions for parents listening who are like, yes, I need some down-regulation, I need the volume turning down on me, and some ideas that you might share with listeners that they could perhaps be a little bit curious about and practice to see if that makes a difference to how they're feeling in themselves, and maybe some ideas that, if they find them successful or useful, that they could potentially share with their children as well?
What I find really important as a parent is to listen to some of the rules that we have for ourselves. Like that concept of striving, we're doing that, we're applying that to everything we do. And that includes how well we parent. And I think that parents have very high expectations. In fact, the word parenting isn't that old. Like once upon a time, we were just a parent or we weren't a parent. There wasn't this idea that we did a good job or a bad job out of it. So I think for me as a parent, one of the things that has been really useful is to be mindful of the sort of orders and instructions I give myself, sort of directions of how I should be in this moment. And I think what a lot of parents don't do is give themselves enough time off. And just breaks, even throughout the afternoon. Like often I have this anecdote that I shared on the podcast. I remember feeling really quite tired one evening, and I just didn't think I was going to do a particularly good job of putting my kids to bed. And so I decided that I was not going to do it,
Yeah.
that I was going to just lie down and watch TV. And I told them, you guys have to put yourselves to bed.
Yeah.
And obviously they were sort of surprised and shocked. And we have 2 floors. They kept coming down and going, are you really not going to read to us? But no, I really am not. I'm watching TV. And the urge obviously was to get up. I was starting to get frustrated, like, it's taking far longer. My head was telling me they're not going to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
All this tightness was coming. And actually I kept choosing, you know what, I'm just going to stay here and watch TV and trust that they'll figure it out. And it took them far longer. They came down many, many times to check on me, but eventually they did it.
Yeah.
And I learned that actually it's okay. And nobody came down the next day and told me what a terrible parent I was. And what did I model for them? I modeled for them that, sometimes we just say no.
Yeah.
And we take a break and we look after ourselves. And I think as parents, we fall into this trap that somehow we need to be always available and always doing things for them. And I worry that the message we're telling them or teaching them is that they can't take breaks. They can't be tired. They can't be overwhelmed, because we're never, right? We're always available. We don't often say no. And I love the work by Emily Edlin, who was on our podcast, this autonomy supported parenting. The idea that we're teaching them to be autonomous and to feel masterful. She jokes that it's sort of lazy parenting, but I love it. I love this idea that our job is to slowly let go and to think about what scaffolding, what support do they actually need. How much is driven by our own worries and how much is driven by their actual needs. And figuring that out can be incredibly difficult. But to be more curious about that.
Yes.
Not just jump in and make assumptions about what they need, but also just have a sort of an eye in as to what do I need today as a parent. I need a break. I'm actually, we're going to have, cereals for dinner. I'm going to, check out for the evening, and that's okay. I think it's an important thing for parents to be able to give themselves permission to take breaks. And that will help them be ready for some of these challenging moments that we're talking about when we've got an anxious child.
That's right. And the role modelling is so powerful. It's incredible, isn't it? And if we do want to to raise our young people, our children, to really genuinely take care of themselves and not just burn the candle at both ends like so many of us do, and many of us are in this stage of parenting. I certainly am at the moment, where my husband has a mum with dementia. My mum's overseas at the moment. I'm caring for my dad while she's away. I've got my own teenagers and my own challenges, and it can be easy to just keep going, can't it? And what is that showing them? And then we don't have that inner kind of reserve. You used air quotes for lazy parenting, but what a relief. I mean, we can all do a bit less, and it's good for our kids. And we are so hard on ourselves. We really are. Chris, I wonder if there's something else that you'd love for parents to know about parenting anxious kids, taking care of themselves, and what's really supportive for their children as well.
Well, I encourage parents to cope out loud, as I call it. So if a parent finds themselves in a challenging situation, and that could be anxiety, it could be frustration, it could be anything, to talk through it out loud and model recognizing, naming their emotion. The parent could be sitting there, they could be in the minivan on the way home from school, and the parent says, wow, this traffic is really awful. I'm starting to feel really impatient, really frustrated. I really want to start honking the horn, but I know that's not going to be very helpful. So I'm just going to take a couple of deep breaths, maybe turn on the radio. And the children may be looking at the parent like, what's going on with mom? But I think it shows children that adults too, are susceptible to, difficult emotions, and we can work through it in a healthy, pro-social way, and not just honking the horn, or making rude gestures or whatever. But it's letting kids know that there are ways of handling these situations that tend to work better than others. And maybe some of that will seep in, and the kids can learn to do that for themselves. But I think it's a good strategy for the parent in the moment
Yeah.
to again, going back to self-regulation, and it also is modeling for the child, how do I handle these difficult thoughts and feelings when they show up.
Yes, coping out loud. That's something that I've modelled at home after having learned it from you so many years ago. It's just a beautiful thing when, in my experience, and I know other parents who've said the same thing, and you may have both experienced this too, when you start to share, and then my daughter would come up to me and she'd say, right, so you need to take some breaths, some slow breaths. And she, when she was younger, she's 15 now, and she'd hold both my hands, and sometimes inside I am feeling so wound up, and I'm trying to say what's happening with me, but I'm feeling so anxious. I'm not even able to draw on my own, skills as much as I would like to. And on occasion she's just, okay, take a couple of breaths with me. And I'm certainly not relying on her to manage my anxiety, but it's a really beautiful thing when they can see that, oh, I know what helps here. And so, they're helping you, and they can help themselves at the same time, should they find themselves feeling that same way. My last question, and I might direct this to you, Emma. For a parent like me, I live with an anxiety disorder. I'm medicated for it, and I will say I thrive with anxiety. I really live a rich and meaningful life, and I have my ups and downs, of course. But there are a lot of parents who aren't sure what to say to their children about their own mental health. If they have a diagnosis, if they may be particularly anxious, or they have a mental health challenge, sometimes parents can feel like, oh, I shouldn't say anything, I don't want to worry them, or they might not understand, or I just need to kind of pretend everything's okay. What's your advice to a parent who struggles with their own mental health and isn't sure how to convey that or share that within their own family?
I think it is very difficult, because sort of woven into anxiety is often fears about how we come across, what others will think of us, so it can get really tight. I think one of the concerns that I often have with people not talking about it openly is that masking, hiding, can be incredibly painful and difficult. So sort of, even if it's hiding from our children, which we see every day, that can make it tighter, and life can get more difficult. So I think, it depends on the age of the children. It also depends on how difficult anxiety has been for you. But having some language around it, like, Mummy, will feel really tight. We can talk about our bodies. Mummy sort of sometimes will have thoughts that she can't do this, and she'll just have to take some breath. The sort of coping out loud, like Chris says, I think can be really helpful, because what I love the most about what you were sharing, Jodi, is this idea that, can we have permission to be who we are? There's some language perhaps around diagnosis that helps us have permission, but ultimately, whether we call it anxiety or, autism or ADHD, whatever it might be, is that we're all wired in our own way.
Yeah.
We all have our histories. We all have our emotions. And one of the most beautiful things I think we can do as parents is teach our children that we can be who we are, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That authenticity, how liberating. And what we call it, we can choose to use sort of diagnostic labels, or we can choose to describe it in different ways. But I think overall masking is, hiding is so hard that I wouldn't encourage it. It's just, developmentally appropriate language is the way to go about it. I don't know if that answers your question.
It really does. It really does. And the other thing I think is important too is that when we're masking, we might feel as though we're hiding it, but often we're not being terribly successful at that. And I know as a child growing up with a parent with anxiety that I would always feel like I could sense and tell things weren't right. And I'd feel responsible for that, even though there was no evidence that I was. That wasn't logical, rational thinking. That was anxious thinking because I was the anxious kid of an anxious mum. And so, yeah, I agree. And I think too what I've done with my children over the years is just kind of share openly, but like you say, in age-appropriate ways. I'm feeling even just how I'm feeling. I might use the word I'm feeling a little bit frustrated. I'm just going to go for a little walk outside and then I'll come back. And even though it might not be specifically around anxiety, just that being open and labelling how I'm feeling over the years has given them permission to be able to do the same, and also for them to learn that no one is happy all the time. It's not natural. It's not normal. We all have lots of feelings, and the more we can share about our own experiences, they learn a lot along the way, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And they can give us feedback, which is so wonderful, right? That if they think something isn't working out for us, they'll tell us. Like they'll go, hey, do you think, like I have a thing, the coping out loud that Chris reflected on, just talked about, is such a beautiful way of putting it. But now and again, I'll get frustrated with the kids and I'll say, I'm just going to walk downstairs and come back up and try that again. And they'll say, do you want to try that again?
Yes.
I'll be like, you know what? Even though I'm thinking, how dare you tell me how to parent? I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we should try that again. You too. In my head, I'm thinking, you too need to try that again.
Totally.
Yeah, we're all going to try that again.
Yes, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm big on do-overs.
Totally.
Thank goodness.
It's delightful and it's human and what a gift for all of them to know that, okay, this is what happens with everybody. One of the things that I've found has really been powerful in our family is if I don't get it right, I got something really wrong. I mean, I wasn't life-threatening in any way, but I didn't handle something well the way I would have liked to have. And my daughter wasn't too thrilled about the whole thing. And I said, you know what? I actually am not. I didn't get that right. If I had my time over, I would do it this way. And that, sometimes I'm not going to get it right. And we spoke about it, really, like, no raised voices, just a conversation. And it was kind of like all frustration kind of dissolved when I just said, I'm going to cop that. I did not handle that well. And I would do it again this way. And she was like, she couldn't argue with that. She was like, fair enough. And so, oh goodness, we'll have to come back to this. We'll have to schedule another recording because there's so much more to talk about. But I'm really excited for you both. You have co-authored some books. One is available now. There are more coming. And so perhaps, Chris, if you could share with us about the first book, and then Emma, maybe you could sort of step in to share about the others, share with our audience what it is that you've put out to the world to really make a difference for families with anxious kids.
Well, these are 3 books, 3 workbooks that are coming out. The first one is out now. It's called Just in Case Sits with Anxiety, and Emma came up with the name Just in Case.
I love it.
And what's different about this book, it's for ages 8 to 12.
Yep.
And it's based on acceptance and commitment therapy. And what's different about this workbook is that it's story-driven. And so the first book is about this boy, Just in Case, who's about 12, who's going on his first babysitting job. And he's quite anxious about it. And he's going to babysit a couple of twins, 2-year-olds, for a couple of hours, a neighbor. So it's not a heavy lift, but he's quite anxious. And so he goes through this babysitting experience, learning how to deal with changing a diaper or a nappy, and learns a lot about himself and how to manage himself when he's anxious. And then there's a little section at the back for parents to be able to support their anxious child. And so we're very happy with these and how they came out.
Oh goodness, that's brilliant.
And they're from Jessica Kingsley Publishers. And it's available on Amazon or directly from the publisher if you're not happy with Jeff Bezos these days.
Yes.
But Emma can speak to the other two.
Okay, thank you. And the notes, all the links are in the show notes as well.
Yes, so we have 3 in total. One that's come out just in case. We have the Glum Twins, Unhooked from Sadness. That'll be out later this month. And the third one is Max Cross, Get Unstuck from Anger. And that one's going to be out in July. So it's kind of every second month. And all 3 books, we really wanted it to be based on a story. Because as clinicians, as parents, there are thousands, tens of thousands of workbooks out there for children. And we recognize that mostly it's parents buying them.
Yes.
Children aren't going out and buying their own workbooks.
Yes.
I don't believe. I'm sure there's a few. So we wanted it to have a story so that parents can read the story with the child and engage the child in some of the ideas that we have in the book. So the stories are hopefully fun, and they have some humor and some lightness, and woven into the stories are little exercises that the characters do. So the Glum Twins and Max and Just in Case, they're all doing little exercises based on acceptance and commitment therapy that we can then do with our children as we read through the book. And we also have that section for parents. So hopefully they're really useful, because we were asked to do anxiety, sadness, and anger because those are 3 big feelings that often our children will face. And as parents, they can be incredibly triggering. I think sadness anger as well. I mean, all 3 of them can be very triggering as parents, and we can feel that we're a bit of a loss. And I don't think everybody needs to go to therapy.
No.
Even though we're clinicians, I think we can be armed with great tools as parents through some of these workbooks and these beautiful podcasts like you're doing, Jodi, and we can just get a little ideas or a little nugget that can help us really change some of those dances that Chris mentioned.
Thank you both for joining me. We were just...
thank you. It's a pleasure.
Oh, goodness. Yes. I've so loved talking with you both, and we were delighting at the start, weren't we, that it's, a different time in Singapore, in Seattle, and in Melbourne, and we're all here together. And I want to thank you both for the work that you do and for sharing just the small part of the wonderful wisdom that you've both shared today on the podcast for parents. It's really important, and I'm really grateful to both of you for your time today.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Really
Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control, and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week.